Hi everybody. Today we are joined, I'm very excited to announce this by the way, today we are joined by Mr. George Wang.
Thank you for having me.
George has been a menswear entrepreneur for a long time. He is the founder of Brio, which is a fabulous boutique in Beijing and actually has expanded into a menswear brand. But today we're having him come on to talk about his latest project, the Rake China edition, which I think is super cool.
Thank you for having me.
No, my pleasure.
I'm very excited to be here. It's been a long time.
It has been.
It's been, more than 2 years since I was here.
Yeah.
Well, since I've traveled outside of China. So, yeah, it's been quite a summer for me.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit first about how you got into menswear?
Whoa. Well, as you know, I used to work in Hong Kong. And Hong Kong is certainly a place where it has a formal dress code or dress culture. And that's when I started to wear what we would consider to be classic menswear. And then, I decided then that if I was going to wear something, I want to wear it well. So I started to look into, like many people who are looking at Instagram now, but we didn't have social media back then. So, just mostly through Japanese magazines to learn and how to dress and what's available, what's out there, and that's kind of how I started. Early 2010, I took my first trip to Italy and met a bunch of bespoke tailors, shoemakers, and then that's kind of when I really went deep into it.
Was that the time you went to Pity with us? Or was that the next year? I don't remember. Because you came with us 1 year.
Yes, that was like your first PT trip. I was there, I remember.
And we went to the wrong place too.
Yeah, we went to PT Palazzo. Yeah. All of us assumed that PT was going to be at PT.
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah, I think that was my second time there.
Okay.
So I remember going to Liverano for fitting with Alan. Yeah. So
You were on the kind of Classico Italia track of menswear much earlier than everyone else too. Because I remember you were buying like Kiton, you were buying Attilini, and you really like recognized how great that stuff was before a lot of people did.
Well, I mean, definitely I wasn't the first one. I would say I was one of the first ones. And those stuff back then wasn't very easy to get either. There weren't that many boutiques, and online shopping hasn't really became a thing yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's not like you can just walk into a store and buy, what you see on the rack.
Yeah.
And just to understand what different models there were, and so it was a lot of experimentation, and a lot of things I bought I regret deeply.
You don't have to regret it. I'm sure you learned something.
As I'm sure it's a common theme amongst the people who are into clothes.
Yeah, that's true, I guess. You have really stuck to the Italian track, though. You liked it, and you never really deviated from it. You always thought it was the best. What makes it so special to you?
I think it comes down to I was always shopping for myself or buying clothes for myself. I wasn't trying to buy into a certain style or certain trends. So what matched my own needs and personalities, I guess, was what we would call Italian style. Although I think recently, maybe even before the pandemic, I've started to kind of deviate a little bit from it, but not say towards more British or more French or more whatever, but just to have a bit more of my own personality injected into it. So, once you've kind of have sampled most things, there's no point in trying another new tailor anymore. So you stick with the ones who you are, who you work well with, and then you start to, just experiment more and become more liberal.
Like you build on it.
Yeah. And I think that's the right way to do it, in my opinion. I don't think there's an ultimate destination that you need to reach. You just have to keep evolving, keep adapting, and the world is changing, the environment is changing too. So you always want to be relevant, I guess.
For sure.
Yeah.
Tell us a little about Brio. How old is Brio now?
We started in 2015, January. So, but we had a little bit of a break in 2020 where our old shop's lease was terminated, and then at that time it was like the peak of the pandemic, so no one knew was going to happen. So we decided that at that point to not renew that lease, but to continue the business on, but look for a different space. And I also wanted to have a bit of change of pace. You know, we started out as kind of like the Armoury, which is more like a select shop where we kind of curate a bunch of brands, other people's brands, and then, you know, maybe put some of our own take into it, and then try to present that to customers. But I've always wanted to really produce my own products, and especially bespoke. So actually, since the beginning of Brio, we've had an in-house workshop, a small workshop, where we initially performed alterations. But you know, as my tailor became more experienced, we started to try to make our own jackets, make our own trousers. But actually the tailor that I hired, he's already an experienced tailor who's capable of making a whole suit by himself. So it wasn't something that's difficult for him technically, but to get him to understand the kind of style that I want, and also the specific techniques and not necessarily skill, but technique and methods of the Italian tailors in the Italian tradition was something that takes time. So I had the idea in the very beginning, but I wanted to give him sufficient time to really kind of understand the foundation of it, not just kind of like reading a cooking recipe and trying to replicate it, but really understand how, you know, ingredients come together, how flavors can complement each other. So you know, 2 years ago, you know, at this kind of junction where we are changing to the new store, I decided to kind of change the setup of the shop from you know, more of a retailer select shop to more of a kind of tailor shop workshop. Yeah. So the new store is a little bit smaller, and it's focused on made to order and bespoke. So we have less ready to wear now. Yeah.
To what extent do you think that's related to your customers? Because you were open for quite a few years. You really got a sense of like who was looking for you, what they wanted. Like, were you catering to the way people were starting to shop, or was this something that you wanted to try to promote instead?
I think one of the main reasons I wanted to change to a new concept was because I started to feel like I'm being shaped too much by what customers want. Because I think for me, the main reason I wanted to start Brio was because I wanted to export my ideas. But you know, from a business perspective, that's not always realistic. You do need to cater to the market. You need to cater to what customers want. So more and more, we are, you know, from a business perspective, trying to, you know, do good on that, and then that kind of started to compromise on the original idea. So you know, I think first and foremost, I need to be happy to run the store.
Sure.
You know, I have to satisfy myself first. And you know, if I'm just selling what sells, that's not really interesting anymore. Yeah. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to change of pace and build my own bespoke tailor shop. So it's more about what we are exporting in terms of our own aesthetic and our own take on kind of classic, a classic skill and a classic method of dressing. Yeah, and also I also had to wait for the customers to be ready for that as well. Because I think if initially we came out with you know, our own bespoke, I think it's less convincing, right? Because you know, how do we explain what we are? So we also needed time for customers to develop their understanding and to have also experimented with, you know, Italian tailors, other tailors. And then when we present our own products, they can immediately understand what we're trying to do. And hopefully they can appreciate that and become customers of us.
Do you find mainland Chinese customers still very like fashion brand driven?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot of people in the mainland. So if you just look at it from a pure statistic point of view, of course, I think what we're doing continues to be a very small niche. But again, because the basis is much bigger, so even if you're a small niche, it can still be a significant market. So I think there's still a lot of opportunities in the space, and I'm optimistic. And also, strangely, the pandemic I think kind of helped a lot of local shops like us and other stores because customers can't really go out to Europe, to Japan to purchase what they want there. So they kept a lot of their consumptions within China. So in a way, it kind of helped. But then at the same time, because the market has been kind of capped, you don't really see a kind of more macro growth. So I think the next couple of years is going to be very interesting, actually. Yeah, because we are kind of looking forward to the mainland being a little bit more open and travel being more easier. So it will be interesting to see how consumption behavior changed then. Yeah.
So would you say that during these last 2 years, because Chinese people were mostly just in China, their tastes developed in a different way from if they used to be able to just, compared to when they used to be able to just get in and out easily?
I think it's actually good because I think if you are able to go all over the world, and so you are keep being exposed to new things, and that might kind of put your focus off. So you're always attracted to by new things and fresh things. But then if you are kind of just forced to look at what you have, then I think you might be able to develop, deeper understandings and also deeper understandings of yourself and what you want and how you want to dress instead of what the stores all over the world are telling you what to buy and how to dress.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's great. I mean, I'm really happy that like mainland Chinese customers are now reaching this kind of new level of development when it comes to taste in clothing, I guess.
I think it's definitely developing.
Yeah. Okay, then how does the Rake China fit into all this? Because all of a sudden, you didn't even tell me. I just saw it somewhere on someone's IG. Hey, it's the Rake China. Oh, George is doing it. I was like, what?
Yeah, I mean, I don't feel like, unlike Waco, the founder of the magazine, I'm not quite as I don't know how to say it, but I'm more willing to be in the background and just to help promote things. So I think it's a natural evolution of what I want to do. I think ultimately I wanted to explore a point of view. So I began that with the store, and then later on with the tailor shop. But that's still very limited to just products and maybe styling. But if I wanted to kind of expand that into a more lifestyle platform, I think media is the natural choice.
For sure.
And then I also have partners in this project. So we debated whether we should just start our own brand or maybe we should kind of franchise something that's already established. And I think given my rapport with Waco and understanding of the Rake, we thought this makes the most sense.
Yeah.
And also the audience in China who are interested in kind of more classic approach, not just to fashion but also to lifestyle. They're already well aware of the Rake. So we think it as a launching point, it makes the most sense to do the Chinese version of this. And also in the media space in China, there isn't another magazine or social media channel or whatever that kind of cater to the crowd that the Rake is catering to. So we think even from a business perspective, it's a good opportunity to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, because it seems like you want to be able to create the culture.
I think so.
With just products, you can't necessarily have the culture. But once you start having the knowledge, then the culture starts to really spring up and grow.
Yeah. One thing I don't really like when I'm running Brio is the sense that I'm always trying to sell things to customers. But that is, but the products is the vehicle to deliver the kind of point of view. But then I just can't avoid that sense that I'm trying to constantly get people to spend money. But I think with the magazine, it's one magazine costs like 100 RMB, and if you subscribe, it's cheaper. So you don't need to spend a lot of money to kind of get the same value or even more, because we're not just talking about fashion here, but also lifestyle and stories. And people, which is something that's a big focus for the Rake. Yeah, so it's like reading about what other people have done, and trying to see yourself in those stories, and maybe get a better understanding of who you are and what you want to do. I think it's very interesting, for sure.
Let's talk a little bit about the nitty gritty. Like I love this, right? This is a Rake Chinese edition
Yeah.
with a Chinese person on the cover.
Yeah.
Like, so rather than reuse the Western covers, you actually decided to shoot new covers.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so as your viewers probably know that the Rake has many other different language versions, and all of them have stick to using the same covers as the original version. But when we talked to the Rake in the beginning, one thing that we're very keen on is to be able to shoot our own covers. I think this makes a lot of sense for the Chinese market because it is a unique market, and also one of the things we want to do with the Rake is to make it relevant to the readers. So, I mean, the first issue we use Anelli because he is kind of like the spiritual embodiment of the Rake. So we can't really get away from that. But from then on, we attempt to do our own covers featuring a local personality or Chinese face as much as possible. I think this is important because we don't think that these kind of classic menswear or these type of lifestyle is exclusive to a certain audience. I think it should be something that can be enjoyed by anyone. And but sometimes it's difficult to see yourself in it if it's always feature a face that is a little bit foreign. So we try to use Chinese models and personalities, celebrities on the cover and in the pages as much as we could. Yeah.
So in terms of content, you use some of the international edition's content. You also generate some of your own. Is that right?
Yeah. At this moment, it's about half and half. So we can pick up both the English version's contents as well as the Japanese versions. So it's quite good for us. And then we can do our own local production in terms of content. At the moment, our editorial team is still small, and realistically, in China, there aren't as much to cover as there would be all over Europe, US, and Japan. So I think this mix will likely to stay for at least the first couple of years. It's a shame because we can't travel freely at the moment. So a lot of the contents that we pick up from the international version and the Japanese version is just something to dream about. But I think they would leave an impression so that when the Chinese are eventually able to get out, they will remember it and try to seek them out. Yeah,
That's cool.
yeah.
And online, is there an online version of the Chinese Rake?
Yes, we do have online outlets, but they are not just a reproduction of what's inside the magazine. So we have WeChat account, we have Weibo, we have Xiaohongshu, which is red. So those are the three channels we primarily focus on. But each one is kind of tailored to their own algorithm and their own kind of audience because they're all a little bit different. And then we produce original content for those. Sometimes we take something from the magazine and kind of restructure it for those specific platforms. But most of the time they are for that platform only. Yeah.
I see.
Yeah, so it's like our editorial team is kind of divided into the print side and then the online side as well.
I see.
Yeah. Because as you know, social media is very important in China.
Yeah, for sure.
So you can't just do print, especially we're only a quarterly magazine. So you need to have something in between each issue to either kind of go deeper into the stories that we're doing in the print magazines, or to kind of generate continued interest. Yeah.
Man, that's great. Well, listen, best of luck with this project because it sounds super exciting.
Yeah.
Where do you hope all of this goes? Brio, the Rake China, where do you hope all this goes in 5 years?
Well, first of all, I think Brio is a completely separate project, so it has nothing to do with the Rake. I don't get any free advertising. But I think Brio, and any other shops like Brio that are in China, hopefully can benefit from the growth of this culture and this style, this aesthetic. Which is what we're trying to promote. And it's very important to say that we're not trying to promote a very strict set of rules or ideals to adhere to. We wanted to present them as a set of values, and it's up to the reader's own interpretation on how they can integrate those. So we don't really have articles to tell you how to, match colors on your outfit or how to, polish your shoes. I think those are important, but I think there are already other people doing that. So we don't want to do that with the Rake. We want to talk about people. We want to interview people who we are considered modern gentlemen. We want to have stories that talk about historical figures, which is something that the Rake is very big on. So we try to do that as well, but focus more on Chinese who are historically significant. Yeah. So in the first issue, we did a feature on Zhao Wuji. Yeah, so I think that.
Who is Zhao Wuji? Because I don't know anything. Who's Zhao Wuji?
So he's a famous painter who lived and worked in Paris. I think he's a little bit, because right now the hottest market is contemporary, so he's not really contemporary, he's kind of more modern. But a few years ago, he broke many auction records. But I think what we like about him is the value that he represents, the kind of cosmopolitanism that I think is needed, especially now in today's world, in coming out of the pandemic. I hope that people are willing to explore again.
Yeah. Also, actually, just as an aside, like Paris is a center for painters, especially foreign painters. I think that history is really interesting too.
Yeah.
Like a lot of very famous Japanese painters who also ended up in Paris, and they built their own aesthetic while they were there. I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, I think if you look at the art world and art scene, and they tend to be open and diverse, no matter where you are. In Beijing, we have this famous area called 798, where also a lot of foreign artists and people in the art field works and lives. So I think that that's also an area the Rake is very focused on in the Chinese edition as well. Yeah.
Fascinating.
Thank you.
We always close these interviews off with, can you share some sort of life tip, some sort of habit, something that you do all the time that you're like, oh, I'm glad I do this all the time. It's really helpful to me. Like, I'll give you an example. Nakagomi-san over at Coherence, he's like, oh, my habit is I always have to have a cup of tea, and it kind of sets the routine for me for the day.
I don't know. Okay.
Or even just some philosophy. You think quite deeply about things. I'm sure you have some sort of thing that you always stick to.
Okay. Well, how about this? I think many people would know this already, but for me, my first passion is cars. So I love driving, and I love driving performance cars, vintage cars. So for me, once in a while, I need to go out for a drive.
Okay.
And that's kind of something that kind of reconfigures my mind to kind of reorder everything. So every time if I go for a long drive, and coming back from that, I feel like I gotta kind of restart. So if I don't go out for drives for too long, I start to kind of lose focus. Yeah, for me that works.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's super interesting.
But if you don't have a car, then I'm sorry, my advice is not very relevant.
Maybe somebody would just enjoy taking the bus. You just get on the bus for an hour.
Take a bike ride or something. I think it achieves the same thing. Yeah. It's kind of like a exercise. Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right, George, thank you so much for your time. Best of luck with the Rake China. Best of luck with Brio, and we hope to see you again sometime.
Thank you, sir.
Take care. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.